Night Shift Whispers.
I have a genuine aversion to large bodies of water. Lakes, rivers, seas, swimming pools, swamps, wells, and even shrimp ponds along the coastal shore. I'm not a fan of any of them. And it's not for no reason. There have been numerous incidents that contributed to this. It all began when I was very young. My family used to take me swimming when I was between 4 and 7 years old. It might sound a bit crazy, but seriously, I often saw mysterious heads popping up from the water. They typically had long hair, with both eyes circled in black like pandas. Their faces were pale like cotton, and their eyes were completely white. It wasn't a one-time or two-time thing, it happened almost every time. I couldn't pretend to enjoy the water while pretending not to see them. On my 7th birthday, I made a request to my parents never to take me swimming again, ever. When I was 11 years old, I spent my vacation at my grandmother's house. There, I made friends with kids my age, and we played together. We roamed around the village and ended up at an old well behind an almost dilapidated empty house. For some reason, we curiously peered into the well. It was evident that the well was just a dark, damp hole with water in it, occasionally housing spider nests. My friends didn't see anything unusual from inside. But when I looked inside, a peculiar face suddenly peered up and grinned at me. Its appearance was almost identical to the mysterious heads I used to encounter in swimming pools. During middle school, our school camping trip was held by a lake in the middle of a forest. It got even crazier there. Strange, ethereal figures that were not quite solid, resembling white mist forming the silhouette of long-haired individuals, danced on the lake's surface every sunset. Once again, I was the only one who could see them. Another terrifying water-related experience occurred when I was 17. My uncle, who lived on the outskirts of a small town, had a weekend fishing hobby at rivers or swamps. One day, while I was at his place, he suddenly called me from the fishing gear store and invited me to join him. He had shown me a great spot the day before where he typically went fishing. It had a small wooden dock. While he finished purchasing bait, he asked me to go ahead to the river and wait for him on the dock. I had already informed him that I wasn't fond of water, but he insisted that the river near his place had never had any mystical stories. I was reluctant, but I eventually went to the river as he suggested. Upon reaching the dock, my uncle was already there, sitting on the edge with his feet in the water. I approached him and commented on his unexpectedly early arrival, but he remained staring blankly at the swiftly flowing water, not turning around, not responding. His eyes appeared fixated on a spot in the middle of the river. A shiver ran down my spine for no apparent reason. It felt like something was about to go awry once again, as it always did when I had to deal with large bodies of water. Before long, my concerns materialized. Countless black hair strands emerged from between the ripples of the river. The hair was long, incredibly long, sprouting from the water's surface as if they had a life of their own. Panic-stricken, I urged my uncle to leave. However, he remained motionless. His face was vacant, devoid of expression. Initially, I intended to pull him away from that place, but I hesitated because my uncle's feet were in the water. I feared that something in the water might pull me in through my uncle's body if I touched him. The only thought that crossed my mind was to call for help. I believed that if there was someone who could rescue my uncle from the clutches of those hair strands, it wouldn't be me. As quickly as I could, before it was too late, I left the dock to climb up the riverbank. As I panted and climbed, I crossed paths with someone who happened to be descending the slope in the opposite direction. I felt relieved for a moment, but only for a few seconds. For the rest of the time, I became even more frightened when I realized that the person coming down the slope was my uncle. Yes, my uncle. A bewildered look reflected in his eyes as he gazed at me. He asked why I seemed scared. I was caught in a web of mystery, not knowing which one to believe. If my real uncle was with me, then who was sitting on the dock earlier? But what if the one who was truly my uncle was the one sitting on the dock, threatened by those hair strands? What would happen to me with this fake uncle? Or what if both were imposters? I stood there like a fool, just allowing the second uncle to shake my body. Not because I believed him to be my real uncle, but because I genuinely didn't know what to do. Fortunately, this one was indeed my uncle. And when we looked back at the river's edge, the figure on the dock had disappeared, leaving no fishing gear or drinks behind. Up until that point, I had more than my fair share of reasons to steer clear of bodies of water. I did my best to avoid pools, rivers, lakes, swamps, wells, and especially the beach. That was until one day, a situation forced me to cross a bridge with my bicycle. I had to get to school, but my usual route was closed for repairs. As my bicycle reached the center of the bridge, just as always, the corner of my eye caught sight of an unusual head with long hair sticking out of the water's surface. I tried hard not to look, but somehow, I succumbed to the temptation. I turned, foolishly. This time, the strange head bore a resemblance to a fellow student, Tiffany. However, she was pale, with entirely white eyes encircled by the usual panda-like rings. It was madness. I quickly pedaled away and did my best to forget the incident. About a week later, our school was thrown into a frenzy with news that Tiffany hadn't returned home for 2 days and hadn't made contact. Both of her parents had filed a report with the police, and Tiffany's whereabouts were being actively sought. A voice within me urged me to suggest focusing the search on the river. However, another part of me quashed this crazy idea and told me to remain silent. In the end, I stayed quiet because I didn't have any rational basis for why the search should concentrate on the river. Unfortunately, 3 days later, Tiffany's body was indeed found in the river, not far from the bridge. She was beyond help, her body swollen as if she had been submerged in the water for days. I went through months of depression following that incident. Since then, I've been absolutely determined to have nothing to do with pools, rivers, lakes, swamps, wells, the beach, or even shrimp ponds. If I ever have to pass by them, I'll put on my dark sunglasses and avoid glancing in their direction.